We are live.
Okay. So we are going to be reading the 8th word from the book, the words Risale-i Nur Collection, written by Said Nursi. Colin Turner is joining us from Istanbul. I am also in Turkey, Düzce, and we have participants from all over the world. Hopefully we will have other speaker if you can make it. Mustafa Tuna is from Duke University in North Carolina, and Colin Hocam is from Durham University in England. So let's start. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Let me give a little bit of an introduction, a personal introduction maybe. There's a beautiful story here. We're going to be reading the story first, and we try to make sense of it as Ustad Said Nursi explains it. This is one of the most widely read, one of the chapters of Risale-i Nur. When I was a child, the first book that I was encountered with was the short words, and when I read the short words, this was the most beautiful one that I thought at the time, that I benefited. The story was very beautiful, and as a personal let's make a confession here. Reading it from another, from English makes it, gives me another benefit. I enjoy it because, it breaks the ulfat, after reading many times, it becomes a kind of an ordinary text, but this is a very beautiful and striking example. And inshallah, we will benefit together while we're reading here this week. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahu la ilaha illa huwal hayyul qayyum. Inna ad-dina 'inda Allahi al-Islam. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Allah, there is no God but He, the ever-living, the self-subsistent. Verily, the religion before Allah is Islam. If you want to understand this world and the human spirit within the world, and the nature and value of religion for man, and how the world is a prison if there is no true religion, and that without religion, man becomes the most miserable of creatures, and that it is Ya Allah, O Allah, and La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah, that solve this world's talisman and deliver the human spirit from darkness. Then listen to and consider this comparison. So we're going to be reading a story that will show us the importance of Ya Allah, La ilaha illallah, and belief in Allah. Long ago, two brothers set off on a long journey. So before getting into the story, Colin Hocam, do you want to say anything about the introduction here?
I don't think so, Mustafa Jam. I don't really have much to say about that.
Okay.
I'll just let you do the story.
Okay. Long ago, two brothers set off on a long journey. They continued on their way until the road forked. At the fork, they saw a serious-looking man and asked him, "Which road is good?" He told them, "On the road to the right one is compelled to comply with the law and order, but within that hardship is security and happiness. However, on the left-hand road, there is freedom and no restraint, but within its freedom lie danger and wretchedness. Now the choice is yours." So let me read this paragraph again. Two brothers set off on a long journey. They continued on their way until the road forked. At the fork, they saw a serious-looking man and asked him, the two guys asked this serious-looking man, which road is good? He told them, on the road to the right, one is compelled to comply with the law and order, but within that hardship is security and happiness. However, on the left-hand road, there is freedom and no restraint, but within its freedom lie danger and wretchedness. Now the choice is yours. After listening to this saying, Tawakkaltu ala Allah, I place my trust in Allah, the brother with a good character took the right road and conformed to the order and regulations. The other brother, who was immoral and a layabout, chose the road to the left just for the lack of restrictions. With our imaginations, we shall follow this man in his situation, which was apparently easy, but in reality burdensome. So we're going to be following the left side of the road. Thus, the man went up hill and down dale until he found himself in a desolate wilderness. He suddenly heard a terrifying sound and saw that a great lion had come out of the forest and was about to attack him. He fled. He came across a waterless well, 60 yards deep, and in his fear, jumped into it. He fell halfway down it, where his hands met a tree. He clung onto it. The tree, which was growing out of the walls of the well, had two roots. Two rats, one white and one black, were attacking and gnawing through them. He looked up and saw that the lion was waiting at the top of the well, like a sentry. He looked down and saw a ghastly dragon. It raised its head and drew it close to his foot, 30 yards above. Its mouth was as big as the mouth of the well. Then he looked at the well's walls and saw that stinging, poisonous vermin had gathered round him. He looked up at the mouth of the well and saw a fig tree. But it was not an ordinary tree. It bore the fruit of many different trees, from walnuts to pomegranates. Thus, due to his lack of thought and foolishness, the man did not understand that this was not just some ordinary matter. These things were not here by chance, and that there were mysterious secrets concealed in these strange beings. And he did not grasp that there was someone powerful directing them. Now, although his heart, spirit, and mind were secretly weeping and wailing at this grievous situation, his evil commanding soul pretended that it was nothing. It closed its ears to the weeping of his heart and spirit, and deceiving itself, started to eat the tree's fruit as though it were in a garden. But some of the fruit was poisonous and harmful. Almighty Allah says in a sacred hadith, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي, I am according to how my servants think of me. I am according to how my servants think of me. Thus, due to his foolishness and lack of understanding, this unhappy man thought what he saw to be ordinary and the actual truth. So that is the way he was treated and is treated and will be treated. He neither dies so that he is saved from it, nor does he live. He is in such torment. So this is the situation of the man on the left road. Now we shall leave this ill-omened man in his affliction and return so that we may consider the situation of the other brother. So let me finish the story, read the rest of the story so that we can compare from the beginning again, inshallah. This fortunate and intelligent person went on his way, but he suffered no distress like his brother. For due to his fine morals, He thought of good things and imagined good things. Everything was friendly and familiar to him. He did not suffer any difficulty and hardship like his brother, for he knew the order and followed it. He found it easy. He went on his way freely and in peace and security. Then he came across a garden in which were both lovely flowers and fruits, and since it was not looked after, rotting and filthy things. His brother had also entered such a garden, but he had noticed and occupied himself with the filthy things, and they had turned his stomach, so he had left it and moved on without being able to rest himself. But this man acted according to the rule, look on the good side of everything, and had paid no attention to the rotting things. He had benefited a lot from the good things, and taking a good rest, he had left and gone on his way. Later, also like the first brother, he had entered a vast desert and had suddenly heard the roar of a lion, which was attacking him. He was frightened, but not as much as his brother, for because of his good thoughts and positive attitude, he thought to himself, this desert has a ruler, and it is possible that this lion is a servant under the ruler's command, and found consolation. But he still fled until he came across an empty well 60 yards deep. He threw himself into it. Like his brother, his hand clasped a tree halfway down, and he remained suspended in the air. He looked and saw two animals gnawing through the tree's two roots. He looked up and saw the lion, and looked down and saw the dragon. Just like his brother, he was seeing a most strange situation. He was terrified like him, but his terror was 1,000 times less than his brother's. For his good morals had given him good thoughts, and good thoughts show the good side of everything. So because of this, he thought as follows. These strange happenings are connected to someone. Also, it seems that they are acting under orders, in which case, these matters contain a talisman. Yes, everything is happening at the command of a hidden ruler. Therefore, I am not alone. The hidden ruler is watching me. He's testing me. He's impelling me somewhere for some purpose and inviting me there. A curiosity arising from this pleasant fear and these agreeable thoughts prompt me to say, I wonder who it is that is testing me, wants to make himself known, and is impelling me for some purpose on this strange road. Let me read this sentence again. So a curiosity arising from this pleasant fear and these agreeable thoughts prompt me to say, so this man says, I wonder who it is that is testing me, wants to make himself known, and is impelling me for some purpose on this strange road. Then love for the owner of the talisman arose out of the desire to know him. And from that love arose the desire to solve the talisman. And from that desire arose the will to acquire good qualities which would please and gratify the talisman's owner. Then he looked at the tree and saw it was a fig tree, but it was bearing the fruits of thousands of trees. So then all his fear left him, for he understood that for certain the fig tree was a list, an index, an exhibition. The hidden ruler must have attached samples of the fruits in the garden to the tree through a miracle and with a talisman, and must have adorned the tree in a way that would point to each of the foods he had prepared for his guests. For there is no other way a single tree could produce the fruits of thousands of different trees. Then he began to entreat that he would be inspired with the key to the talisman he called out, "O ruler of this place, I have found myself here, and I take refuge with you. I'm your servant. I want to please you. I am searching for you. O ruler of this place, I have found myself here, and I take refuge with you. I am your servant, and I want to please you. I am searching for you." On making this supplication, the walls of the well suddenly parted, and a door opened onto a wonderful, pleasant, quiet garden. Indeed, the dragon's mouth was transformed into the door, and both it and the lion took on the forms of two servants. They invited him to enter. The lion even became a docile horse for him. "O my lazy soul, and O my imaginary friend, come, let us compare the position of these two brothers so that we can see how good comes out of good and evil comes of evil." Let's find out. So shall we stop here and discuss the story, Colin Hocam, from the beginning, if you like, and what is going on here?
I can see Mustafa Tuna is here.
Okay,
Hoca
Mustafa Hocam.
is here.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry, I joined late. Colin Hocam, I think it would be better if you started, because I'm still trying to ease in to the conversation.
Welcome, Mustafa Hocam.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
A very quick contribution. So far, I can see that the narrative, the story here is the story of two individuals with two very different understandings of creation, two very different interpretive frameworks. One of them has a search for meaning, a sincere search for meaning, and a sincere reading of the creation using his fitra and looking at things and understanding them and making tafakkur on them. And even though they seem to be like a puzzle, he's able to solve the puzzle because he's keeping an open mind and he's using his God-given abilities to rationalize and to use the intellect of his heart to interpret the creation, because we all interpret the creation. We read the creation because it's like a book. And this whole story about the well and the dragon and the lion and the deserts, these are all showing us that we live in a representational universe. Everything represents something other than itself. And the first individual, who is portrayed as being optimistic and he's ready to use his faculties against the other individual who is pessimistic and sees everything in the light of his own shortcomings, in the light of his own negativity. So when it's a bit like looking in a dark room. If you look in a dark room, you see shapes that you don't recognize. For example, a large room in a house that's full of furniture, but you don't know it's furniture. It looks like shapes, frightening shapes, monsters, ghosts and ghouls and all of these awful things in your imagination. But when you put the light on, you see actually they are very familiar things, such as desks and bookcases and chairs and things like that. It's when it's dark, you can't see, or you don't want to see, that you imagine these strange things. But when you see with the light of the search for meaning, a sincere search for meaning, everything then, when the light goes on, everything becomes readable, understandable, familiar. So that's just my initial contribution. This whole story is the story of the universe as a book. Some people want to read it sincerely in order to derive meaning and solve the puzzle. The word talisman here really should be puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
A talisman in English means something else. So it's all about reading the universe. It's about reading the universe correctly. And it's about coming to either the conclusion that the universe has an owner or the conclusion that it doesn't. So that's my initial contribution.
So
Thank
the key is, thank you Colin hocam. Allah razı olsun. The key is here is ene, I suppose. It's about how you where do you rely on? Do you rely on yourself to interpret the things around, or are you asking for some other intervention, so to speak, you know, to show you the right way, for guidance, asking for a guidance? If you rely on
guidance
yourself,
has to come from somewhere else, doesn't it, really? I mean, Ustad Nursi in another work talks about how human reason is like a tiny torch that only shows so much. And he says that when he smashes the torch, it's then that the lights go on, because what that means is he's abandoning his own shortcomings in his rational faculties, which only takes him so far, and then he's submitting to the very bright light of the Quran to show him the meanings in things which he can appreciate because it makes sense to his own heart, to his own soul, and all of his faculties. It makes sense. So the Quran is not asking us to accept something which is strange and unusual and unfamiliar. We can easily see that things make sense in the light of the Quran. And of course, the other individual doesn't do that because he's basically relying on his own limited reason.
Yeah, thank you. So Mustafa hocam, what is your initial
yes,
take on
assalamu
the
alaikum
story?
again. Thank you.
Salam.
But two things I will say. First, obviously, most of us know the rest of the story, and we know the context and from our general understanding of how these treatises are formulated, we know that all of this is not just a story. This refers to things in reality. This is a depiction of reality, and what jumps at me when I think about this is how striking this story is. How almost like a fabulous, fantastic world that you would encounter in like high-budget movies like Lord of the Rings or something like that. Like and I look around and I see like trees, walls, driveways, roads, cars, everything looks very familiar, and I don't it doesn't feel striking to me. The world that I'm living in doesn't feel striking. But then when I go over the story again and start to think about what relates to what in the real world and so on and so forth, I start to feel that, well, this is actually striking. Like that this tree was a dry branch, say in February, and somehow these green paper-like things came out of that dry branch, and then that tree started to bear fruits that are sweet and palatable and so delicious and so on and so forth. Or that this car is somehow moving, its wheels are turning, and there is that gas that's burning in it, and that's somehow producing this energy, and that's turning into motion and so on and so forth. So I guess the first thing that I would expect from my lower soul to do as I hear this story is to peel away that misconception of normalcy that comes as a result of familiarity, right? The story is presenting reality in such a way that it helps us to recognize the extraordinariness, the fabulousness, the miraculousness that's going on around us all the time in things that we otherwise think to be normal, quote unquote. The second is these two brothers, are all both living the same story. They are in the same movie. They are in the same world, but how different they are seeing it, which means that the what you see needs to come from within, right? The change has to happen within, and then, of course, as Koyun Hocam pointed out, what comes from within is never going to be enough to realize the entire reality, because you are in a tiny piece of that larger reality, and you will never be able to see the whole thing on your own. And they used to give the example of a microbe living on the tooth of a human being, right? What does the microbe know of the human being? Whether the microbe has peeled away that sense of familiarity and starting to see reality or not, right? The big picture has to be shown to you, but in order to recognize the big picture, you need to be ready to receive the light that comes, the information, the knowledge that comes, right? So it is a matter of being humble and willing to receive, and being arrogant and supposing that what you see is what it is. But at the end, they are both living the same story, and the reason why they are seeing it different is coming from within.
Yeah. So you're going back to the argument. This is about how you try to interpret, as just Mustafa Hocam said. Are you relying on your own, again, ego? Do you claim that I am smart enough to make sense of things around me? This is my understanding. I am smart enough to make sense of things and understand and solve the riddle myself. I don't know if riddle is a good word, maybe, instead of talisman or a puzzle. And I can make sense of this, and I solve it. I can solve it. The first guy, he sees the fruits, and he observes the fruits. Oh, this is this fruit, and this is that fruit, and this is, it tastes like this. The other one tastes like this, and the fruits are formulated this way, on that way. Analyze it, but going in like, but he pays attention to the maybe details in life, in general, but he doesn't really pay attention to what is the riddle behind this, why there is this, why there is existence, why there is this beauty in the world, why there is orderliness, equilibrium, and balance, and things like that, and what is the riddle behind it, and I cannot solve it myself. So I have to rely on something else, and it has to be God, and God talks with us through revelation. And this is, to really understand this story, you just need to be a human. You don't need to be following this religion or that religion, to be, to understand the story. This is the beauty of one of, Risale-i Nur, that when you read it, you just need to be human, and it talks to everybody, I feel like. And this is one of those beautiful stories. And I also heard and read that this is a story, as a footnote, that was in the Suhuf Ibrahim, the revelation that came to Ibrahim alayhi salam. This is mentioned in Fihrist, part of Risale-i Nur. There is a source saying this, but I couldn't make sure, I couldn't find the real source, but there is this mention. And this is also a story in the book of one of Tolstoy's book. I also read it somewhere. So this is a known story. It's a beautiful story, but the way Said Nursi Ustad formulates it makes it even more striking to take lesson from. So shall we go into discussing the first brother and his situation in more details, or should we go into how Ustad makes sense of it and explains it to us? Koyun Hocam,
Maybe we can look at his language, Mustafa, Ustad's language, and
okay.
the symbols that he uses.
Yeah,
and
this is a
I found
symbolic.
it
Yeah.
No, go on.
Yeah. So this is a symbolic chapter. These are symbolizing a lot of things. We're trying to make sense of it before we read what Ustad's explanation of it. So yeah, maybe we should go into how Ustad explains it, then we can discuss further if you like.
I was interested in your comment about Ibrahim alayhi salam, that this story was in the.
Yeah, I heard, I read it. It's in Fihrist. There is a source. It's saying this was in the book Suhuf Ibrahim alayhi salam, the revelation that came to Ibrahim alayhi salam. I researched a little bit about this. Tolstoy refers to it as it's coming from an Indian source.
It's quite possible that it comes from an Indian source, but the point is that Ibrahim, as we know from the story, looks at the stars and the moon and the sun, and he sees all of them set. He thinks, maybe the stars are have created power, maybe the sun has created power, maybe the moon.
Yes.
And he sees that they all set, they all rise and then they fall again. And then he realizes that, in the search for meaning, we are searching basically for immortality. This is our main driving motivation in our lives, all of us.
Yes.
We want permanence. And the thing is, you can't find permanence in an impermanent universe. You can't find infinity in a finite world. You can't find absoluteness and everlastingness in limited transient realm. And I think all of the symbols here you will find, they're all pointing to this, and they're pointing to Abraham's alayhi salam conclusion that I do not love those things which set. In other words, the things of this world in which we invest our needs and emotions, they can't deliver. We think that the world can deliver us what we need, but it can't, because it's deaf to our needs. It's dumb to our entreaties, and it's blind to our situation, because like us, it's created. So we can't get, eternality and everlastingness from transient things. This is our tragedy. And these two people are, they are embodying the search for meaning. One of them arrives at meaning, and the other doesn't. So maybe if you go through the symbols, you will, we will be able to see it better.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Colin Hocam. Yeah, that's right. The gist of the story is starting from this transience of everything. The dragon and the lion both are attacking, and the rats are gnawing the roots. So he's about to die anyways. It could be any moment, any hour. We can, pass away from this life. And whatever you're trying to make sense of is all transient. Whatever you're trying to rely on, except Allah, is all transient. So you have to ask for a bigger picture, to a better meaning that is everlasting. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think
Mustafa Hocam, please.
Two things. One, I actually read a part of this story quoted at the beginning of an academic book, and unfortunately, I didn't record that. And I can't go back to it and find it, but I think it was the citation was to Shirazi. So it is a story that, as far as I understand, exists in Persian in the literature, and Colin Hocam may have better means to reach the original, since I understand he can't do research in Persian, but I think it was Shirazi. I'm not entirely sure. And then there it might be cited as being from the Suhuf Ibrahim. That's one thing. The second thing, I kind of sense three tropes in the story. One is transience and the urgency that comes with it. Second is disproportionality between what is being witnessed and what is expected to happen. Like there's a fig tree, so it is one tree but it's bearing multiple fruits. So this disproportionality points to something happening beyond what is visible. right? And the third, I would say, is the search for meaning that is inspired by trying to understand the reality of this disproportionality, right? So this is happening. What's happening cannot be expected from what I see here. Therefore, there's something beyond this. What is it? And then
Yes.
the meaning that is going to be attributed to what that is. So I kind of, in my mind, divide the story into three tropes.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Mustafa Hocam. It's really good. You broke it down into, the main themes here. I really also enjoyed, I read it twice, the way the guy on the right tries to speak and communicates with the king, or in this example, or whoever is in power. He's trying to communicate with him. So this is innate, I guess. This is in our nature, to try to make sense and try to communicate with who is behind all these things. So he says, I wonder who it is that is testing me, wants to make himself known, and is impelling me for some purpose on this strange road. So both of them are riddled and trying to make sense of what's happening. But this guy on the right is asking from an outside source to an ultimate being, and try to communicate with him in a beautiful way. And then he calls out, "O ruler of this place, I have found myself here, and I take refuge with you. I am servant, and I want to please you." This is really interesting and beautiful. So he's aware that there is a ruler of this place, even, receiving any revelation or anything. He's just looking, as you just said, the transience and this proportionality of the situation, and he's trying to make sense of it. And he reaches out and calls out to the ruler of the place. He says, "Oh, I have found myself here. I take refuge with you." So he already in aware of his weakness, and then he says he wants to be the servant, and I want to please you. I'm searching for you. So let's go into how Ustad explains it, and we still have some time, inshallah. Look, the unhappy traveler on the left road is all the time trembling with fear, waiting to enter the dragon's mouth, while the fortunate one is invited into a blooming, splendid garden full of fruit. And the unfortunate one's heart is being pounded by an awful terror and grievous fear, while the fortunate one is gazing at and observing strange things as a delightful lesson, with a pleasant fear and loving knowledge. With a pleasant fear and loving knowledge. Also, the miserable one is suffering. Would you like to comment on this part? It was really interesting. I really like the attribute here, the pleasant fear and loving knowledge. Colin Hocam, isn't that interesting, the way you phrased it?
Sorry, I was away from just a couple of seconds there. The trembling with fear is interesting because if we can't find meaning, or if we interpret the creation in a way that accords with our prejudices, and if we deny that there is a transcendent aspect to the creation, then everything falls back on itself. The connection between the creation and the creator becomes severed, and if you like, all those immaterial cords which connect transient beings to the transcendent being, they are cut and they are severed, and they fall back on the creation itself, and we have no option but to derive meaning from created beings. And as Abraham has shown us, things which set do not have the weight to bear our eternal aspirations. You know, our eternal aspirations are very, very heavy. We want and expect to exist forever because we've been given the ability to want eternity. You know, just as we've been given stomachs, it shows that food exists. We've been given, thirst, and that shows that water exists. Then this desire for the hereafter shows that the hereafter exists. If we need to fulfill that, and if we think that, you know, there is no other realm in which that can be made manifest, we will try to derive eternality from this realm. And that always ends up disastrously because this realm doesn't deliver. And we try to create the heaven that we believe in, but which we think is in this world. We try to create it here. And that just causes hell. It becomes hellish. So, and of course, all the time, the unhappy traveler is going to be trembling with fear because he doesn't trust in the source of all being. He trusts in things themselves. And things themselves cannot be trusted because they have no power. And of course, the unbeliever suffers under the delusion that everything has power because he wants to have power as well.
Yeah. What caught my attention here particularly was that, you know, I had discussions about this particular issue in the West, in America. People saying that fearing God is not delightful. Why should we fear God? I had this question from some people when we read, you know, some of the chapters in Risale-i Nur, and this is here also coming up. I don't know, maybe the culture is different in the, I mean, in Turkey at least, you know, there is more strict parenthood going on in, you know, in our part of the world, and in the West, I guess that's more loose. I don't know how the parenthood goes, but, you know, fear is not attached to, for some people, for some reason, to loving. But, you know, we fear our parents and we love our parents at the same time. So we can make sense of this. Here also it says pleasant fear and loving knowledge. So I was quite, you know, fascinated by how Ustad put it in this way for the person that goes on the right way. He says strange things. He takes lesson, and he also fears, but the fear is not as you know, as gruesome as you just, you know, explained for the one on the left side. That's interesting.
Yeah, maybe Mustafa can throw more light on it. The only thing I can say is that, for example, when you are waiting for iftar in Ramadan, you have a kind of not fear, but you are enjoying your hunger, right? Your hunger becomes, in a sense, pleasurable because you know that the one who has asked you to fast is gonna manifest his, you know, his razaqiyah on you, inshallah, when you break your fast. So there's a kind of pleasant pain, in a sense. You know, the hunger is pleasant, and also the fear is pleasant because we know sometimes, you know, a child, the father plays with the child a little boisterously, and the child gets a little fearful, but the child knows that the father is going to hug him and kiss him at the end. So it's all worth it, you know, and it's quite pleasant actually to be scared by your father or by your mother, you know, when they're playing games with you. So I think that's a nice way, you know, pleasant fear and loving knowledge. Knowledge brings love if it's understood properly.
Yes, that's important. You know, knowledge is not a dry thing. It comes together with love. Mustafa Hocam, do you have any particular understanding here?
I mean, yes, I can. I can try to say a few things. First, you know, I would say this with a caveat that I'm no expert on religion in America, or I've been to England only for 2 days, so I can't even speak about that. But in general, I sense a very Protestant attitude in what you are saying. Why should I fear God? right? I don't think that you would hear this from a Catholic or even an Eastern Orthodox person. And that comes with a refusal of or refutation of institutional religion and the accountability that institutional religion expects from people. And that's not even in all Protestant denominations of Christianity either. It's a more recent, more modern thing. And I think its core, its origin is in the rejection of accountability, right? So people don't want to be accountable before a higher entity, and therefore they imagine that higher entity only as love, period. But as you said, a naked, a dry kind of love, which I think is delusional, because fear is there, whether you attribute or whether you establish some kind of relationship between the higher entity and the fear or not. The fear is there. The world we live in, once we peel away that sense of false sense of normalcy that comes from familiarity and start to see things with a fresh eye and an eye that tries to pierce into the reality of things, the world in and of itself, without that higher entity, is fearful because of the very disproportionality that we talked about. Like, things don't add up. And there's another form of disproportionality, and that is my desires, my needs, my wishes, this innate and undefeatable desire for permanence, and so on and so forth. And the reality, the cold reality that I have no power to achieve any of my desires or fulfill any of my needs. So, and add to it, these things are happening, but I cannot understand how they are happening. So this all is actually quite frightening, and there is fear in there. So it is not between fear and love, but rather whether there is a power out there that can help us overcome the natural fear that the world inspires in us, so that we can actually live in a state of comfort and tranquility and confidence, because we know that that power is going to help us out of this fearful situation. Now, that comes with a price, though, and that is that that higher entity is a higher entity, and you need to recognize his highness, his holiness, his sanctity, and you need to fear offending him. You need to fear breaking the bounds that he wants you to live in, because again, we start to recognize that all of this is meaningful. Then you come to the point of what the meaning is, and you start to recognize that this is a setup that higher entity has laid out for you to come closer to him. And in order to do that, there are certain things that you are supposed to do, right? Like reaching out and calling out to him the way the person in this story does, right? So all of this comes with an accountability, and the fear that we are talking about here, right, is actually if we fear ourselves because we see that there is this tendency that's coming from within to break away from him. I think it is attributed to Sartre that he says, like, when somebody stands next to a cliff, what one fears is not falling, but rather jumping off. Right, and then you can, if you try that in a high place, you can feel that, like it's no different from standing 5 feet away, but you are filled with a fear as if you are going to fall, but you are actually fearful of jumping off, right? So the way Ustad explains this with a beautiful metaphor is how a child, when his mother gets angry with him, goes and tries to hide himself in his mother's bosom, right? Because the mother is
Yes.
angry, the mother can, slap him or something, can beat him up, and he goes and hides in the mother's bosom. So that's the fear. That's the fearful. That's pleasant fear, and Star says like that's the most pleasant place to be for a child. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with being fearful of Allah. That's something good. That's something good we should do. We should have fear of Allah. Especially we are weak and we make mistakes and we sin, we transgress, and we have to have that fear to keep us away from sinning and doing something wrong. And but at the end, also we should have the trust that Allah has grace and that He is also loving us, right? So there has to be a balance between the two. Both fear and love should go hand in hand together in a good way.
Abi, I just want to add one thing as well, like in type of
Please.
what has been said. Fear comes from two routes. One is from our intellectual ability, which is like nothing in that. Just we can completely fear by our brain. And if we don't know anything, or we just do harm, or just say, hey, this is going to kill me, or this is something that is going to punish me. But there is another fear that comes from our heart, which is what we call khawf, which means not only intellectual ability, but also the heart is also that fearing and sensing. Like Abi was saying that, fear from hurting him or her and people. That is the second fear. That is what we call the pleasant fear. That is coming from heart, not from the dimag or just the intellectual ability or brain. So the fearing from Allah is totally coming from heart. Or when we talk about the mother, if she hits us, that we are still going there. We are fearing, but we still go hug her, or father. So that is not only coming from our brain, but also it's coming from our heart, because we know him, we know her. And that fearing of Allah or God is just same thing. Pleasant fear is the same thing. That is coming from heart. That's what we call khawf. Khawf is different than what we call is the korku, just fear in Turkish as well. Just wanted to add this one. So that's why that we are fearing from Allah with the love of Allah. We know that, as you guys already said. Just wanted to say there are two fears.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution. So let me we have limited time. Let me read a little bit more. Also, the miserable one is suffering torments in desolation, despair, and loneliness, while the fortunate one is enjoying himself, full of hope, longing, and the sense of belonging. Enjoying himself, full of hope, longing, and the sense of belonging. So this is he knows he belongs to Allah, and he's missing. So he wants to meet him, right? He wants to see him, if possible, in a way. This is also a very beautiful sentence. So we should have, right? Please, Colin Hocam or Mustafa Hocam, if you want to join in about the sentence. Enjoying himself, full of hope, longing, and a sense of belonging. This is beautiful also. Furthermore, the unfortunate one sees himself as a prisoner subject to the attacks of wild beasts, while the fortunate one is an honored guest who is on friendly terms and enjoying himself with the strange servants of his generous host. Also, the unhappy one is hastening his torments by indulging in foods which are apparently delicious, but in fact poisonous. This is really also interesting. The fruits in this world are delicious, but in fact poisonous. For the fruits are samples. There is permission to taste them so as to seek the originals and become customers for them. But there is no permission to devour them like an animal. So the fruits are there to test, to taste, and to seek the originals, become customer for them, but there's no permission to devour them like an animal. But the fortunate one tastes them and understands the matter. He postpones eating them, takes pleasure in waiting. Moreover, the unfortunate one is wronging himself due to his lack of discernment. He's making a truth and a situation which are as clear and bright as daylight into a dark and oppressive fear, into a hellish delusion. So this is all about his perspective. He does not deserve pity, nor does he have the right to complain to anyone. SubhanAllah. So let's stop here, and let me please can you share your last thoughts about this particular passage? Colin Hocam?
It's a very rich passage that actually
Yeah, it is.
to be opened up, really. There's so much you can say about this, but basically we have a binary here. We have the search for meaning that ends in meaning, and we have the search for meaning that ends in meaninglessness. There are two ways of reading the creation, to be very, very blunt. One is to read the creation as something which points to the transcendent and which brings about all of this wonder and awe and loving knowledge and all of the things, you know, that he mentions here as corollaries. It's about interpretation. It's about reading in the name of Allah, really, because if you read in the name of the things themselves and see things as self-sufficient, then you have to bow down before everything instead of bowing down before the one. Instead of having that pleasant fear of Allah, you have absolute terror of absolutely everything because you don't know it. You can't know it. It's very distant from you. It's not familiar. It's threatening, and you have to pay it a wage, and that wage is worship. Because if you want to worship yourself, then you have to justify that by worshiping everything else. They will make you justify it by making you worship them. So this is a binary. It's quite a savage binary because it's all or nothing. It's reading the creation either as a letter written, a love letter really, written by God to us, or it's a meaningless bunch of scribbles, you know, like a child of 2 scribbles on a paper. If you are not, if you're looking through your own limited reason, you can't read the creation as transcendent. You read it as meaninglessness, and then from that absurdity follows. That's my sort of final take on
this is very binary, as you just said, but in daily life we are going back and forth and to the right and to the left, you know, depending on our situation, our state of heart and mind and actions in our daily lives. We can deviate easily, and you know, if we really see the truth, then we can enjoy what has been said for the right brother on the right side. Mustafa Hocam, can you please also?
I think Colin Hocam rephrased very well. I don't think I have much to add to it. I'll just say that the way to see it clearly is through submission, because everything is actually clear. But one needs to see the big picture, and we on our own cannot see the big picture, as in that example of a microbe living on a tooth of a human being. But through submission to the light of faith, then it becomes clear. The problem then arises from our lower soul's resistance to submission, and then that pulls us in this way or that way and blurs things out. So to the extent that our faith gets stronger and stronger, we see things more clear, and maybe all have that, inshallah.
Inshallah. So we should put ourselves, we're trying to, you know, assess the situation of 2 different brothers as if we are outsiders sometimes, but you're actually one of those brothers. We are in either the one on the left or the one on the right. So we should put ourselves into the shoes of these brothers and try to, you know, emulate ourselves and see in what state we are in our daily lives, and, you know, we have to assess ourselves, put an accountability on us, what we are, what's our situation, what's my state of mind and heart and spirit today in this particular hour, and am I the one on the right side, and trying to reach Allah and ask Him for guidance, and do I see the world around myself as the one as servants, or do I get fearful, and do I really try to make sense of things around me, see, does it lead me to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Inshallah, may Allah give us that strength of iman to see the truth inside and try to act on it as much as possible. Thank you for your contributions, Mustafa Hocam and Colin Hocam and Hikmet abi. This was really fruitful. So let's close it here for tonight. Jazakallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.